Hello students, I am Raghavan Kumar Singh, faculty of US Academy and Institute. Today we will discuss class 10th Civics 3rd chapter, Democracy and Diversity. In this chapter we will discuss about power sharing and how powers can be distributed to accommodate linguistic and regional diversities. We will also discuss democracy respond to social differences, division and inequalities. In this chapter, we will start with an example of public expression of social division. After that, we will discuss some general substances about how social differences can take various forms, how they turn to democratic politics effect and is affected by these social diversities. A story from Mexico Olympic. During the medal ceremony of the 200-meter race, which was held in 1968 Olympics at Mexico City, two African American athletes, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, raised a black-cloved feast during the playing of the US national anthem. They had won the gold and bronze medals respectively. With these gestures, they tried to draw international attention to racial discrimination in the United States. The black-gloved and raised clenched fists were meant to symbolize black power. The picture shown below depicts an important landmark in the history of the civil rights movement in United States. Homogeneous society, a society that has similar kind of peoples, especially where there are no significant ethnic differences, for example, Germany and Sweden. Anybody who shifts from one region or country to another region within a country or to another country, usually for work or other opportunities, is called migrant. Civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King Jr. This movement lasted from 1954 to 1968. The movement refers to a set of events and reforms movements aimed at abolishing legal racial discrimination against African and Americans. This movement practiced non-violent method of civil disobedience against racially discriminatory laws and practices. Black Power movement. This movement emerges in 1966 and lasted till 1975. It was a more militant and anti-racial movement. The Black Power movement advocates even violence if necessary to end racial in the US. Now, incident of two US athletes who protested at Mexico Olympic in 1968. As we know that Tommy Smith and John Carlos, the US athletes, received their medal wearing only a pair of black socks with no shoes to represent black poverty. The black-gloved and raised clenched fists were meant to symbolize black power. They were responsible to social division and social inequalities. With this gesture, their intention was to draw international attention to racial discrimination in the United States. Peter Norman wore a human rights badge on his shirt during the ceremony to show his support to the two Americans. The medals were taken back from Tommy Smith and John Carlos because the International Olympic Association held both of them guilty of violating the Olympic spirit by making a political statement. Now, the differences, similarities, and division. The story from the Mexico Olympics shows an example of social division and social inequalities. But in society, there are other forms of social division that exist. As you have learned in the previous two chapters, regional, linguistic, and religious differences has created social divisions. Now, origin of social differences. The social differences are mostly based on the accident of birth. For example, peoples around us are male or female, they are tall and short, have different kind of complexions, or have different physical abilities or disabilities. But some of the differences are based on our choices. For example, some peoples are atheists, that is, they don't believe in God or any religion, while some peoples believe in God. There are various other choices, such as choosing what to study, which occupation to take up, and which games or cultural activities to take part in. Social differences divide similar peoples from one another, but they also unite very different peoples. Peoples belonging to different social groups share differences and similarities, cutting across the boundaries of their groups. Now, overlapping and cross-cutting differences. Social differences imply a state when peoples are discriminated or one class or group is given preference over the other due to the difference in their social, economical, or racial inequalities. Overlapping and cross-cuttings are the two types of social differences. When one kind of social difference becomes more important than the other, and people start feeling that they belong to different communities, this is known as overlapping differences. It results in a social division and disintegration. For example, in India's Dalit face this type of discrimination as they belong to poor families. In social differences cross-cut one another, it means that a group that share a common interest on one issue are likely to be in different sides on a different issue. For example, the Northern Ireland and Netherlands both are predominantly Christians but divided between Catholic and Protestants. Now, politics of social division. The combination of politics and social division is very dangerous and explosive. Democracy involves competition among various political parties. If they start competing in terms of some existing social division, it can make social division into political division and lead to conflict, violence, or even disintegration of a country. What can be the range of outcomes of politics and social division? In Northern Ireland, the difference between the two major sectors of Christianity, that is 53% of Protestants and 44% of Roman Catholics, took the forms of politics. The Catholics were represented by nationalist parties who demanded that Northern Ireland be unified with the Republic of Ireland, a predominantly Catholic country. The Protestants were represented by Unionists who wanted to remain with the UK, which is predominantly Protestants. Later on, It took a drastic form which ended by taking the lives of hundreds of peoples. In Yugoslavia, political competition along regional and ethnic lines led to the disintegration of Yugoslavia into 6 independent countries. At the same time, every expression of social division in politics does not lead to such a disaster, but it affects voting in most countries, especially in India. Now, determinants. 3 factors are crucial in deciding the outcomes of the politics of social division. The outcomes depend on how people perceive their identities. If people see their identity in singular and exclusive terms, it becomes very difficult to solve. It depends on how political leaders raise the demands of any community. It is easier to accommodate demands that are within the constitution framework and are not at the cost of another community. It depends on how the government reacts to the demands of different groups. Now, how people perceive their identities. If people see their identity in exclusive terms, it becomes difficult to accommodate. As long as peoples in Northern Ireland saw themselves as only Catholic or Protestant, their differences were difficult to reconcile. It is easier if identities are complementary with the national identity. This helps to stay together. How people's leader raise demands and community. It is easier to accommodate demands that are within the constitution framework and are not at the cost of another community. The demand for only Sinhala was at the cost of the interest and identity of the Tamil community in Sri Lanka. How governments react to demand of different groups. If the rulers are willing to share power and accommodate the reasonable demand of minority community, as in Belgium, social division becomes less threatened for the country. But if the demand is suppressed in the name of national unity, as in Sri Lanka, the end results is quite opposite. Such attempts at forced integration sow the seed of disintegration. In a democracy, the political expression of social division is very normal and can be healthy. This allows various disadvantages and marginal social groups to express the grievances and get the government to attend to these.